What's going on, friends? Today it is time we take a look at the forgotten twin cam engine. I know all you guys that have a twin cam 110, the Screamin Eagle 110, you guys always feel left out because we're either talking about an 88, a 96, a 103, or the Milwaukee 8. So the twin cam 110, there may not be that many of them out there, but you guys are definitely not forgotten. So when it comes to the twin cam 110, you guys often feel left out because literally it does seem like a forgotten engine. It is one of Harley's most powerful twin cams that ever rolled off the line. Now, of course, there was the 120 ST and the 120R, but those were only crate engines. Those never actually made it into production. So, for the longest time, the Screamin Eagle 110 engine was only reserved for CVO bikes. Now, as we all know, the twin cam 110s were made in very limited numbers, mainly in the CVO engines. But later on, they were available in the S models. You could get those in a Fat Boy, a Softail Slim, or, as you all know, the Lowrider S. Guys, before we get too far into today's video, please don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Now guys, when it comes to the Screamin Eagle 110, it does have some superpowers. This thing, it is a larger bore, obviously, than the 103, but it does have some things that the 103 doesn't. Now, I know that the Screamin Eagle badging on the engine, this is pretty misleading, because other than the larger bore and a better set of heads on it, everything on the bottom end is completely stock. If you guys checked out my video on how the Screamin Eagle engines were a little bit misleading, this rings true for all Screamin Eagle engines out of the factory. Now, what the Screamin Eagle 110 does have is it does have the larger valves, and it does have a better spring pack in it, which lets you take advantage of some more aggressive cams without having to worry about changing your valve springs out. Now, when we look at stock numbers on the 110s, we are really getting numbers anywhere from 80, 85 to even upwards of 90 horsepower. So it really does vary whose dyno these engines are on. But one thing that really remains consistent when it comes to the Screamin Eagle 110 is the torque. Now, the torque is right at about 100 to 105 foot-pounds. Once again, just depends whose dyno it's on and who's operating the dyno. Now, don't be fooled. The Screamin Eagle 110, this engine does have a lot of horsepower potential in it. The one thing that really holds it back is the lower factory compression. But you put some compression in these, they can really make some big power. But I know a lot of guys don't like to go with super high compression on the street because you do run into some issues of getting some pinging and some knocking, even on 91 octane fuel. But with just a good set of slip-ons and getting it tuned on the dyno, guys, you could crank out 94 horsepower and roughly about 110 foot-pounds of torque. That's not bad at all. I mean, that's pretty good. That's where you could really see that displacement and those larger valves in that head taking over. Not to mention the 110s, they all came with the Screamin Eagle 555 cam, which is a great low to mid-range torque cam. Now on the Screamin Eagle 110, without going to a big bore kit, if you're looking to get more power out of them, once again, best power per dollar is just by doing a basic cam swap. Now, and once again, it's always the wood cams that come out on top, and that rings true with the Screamin Eagle 110 engine as well. But a very popular cam from S&S is S&S's 585. This is a popular swap for a lot of dyno guys, especially with the 103s. But you can also swap this in to your 110. Now the Screamin Eagle 255 cam is pretty strong in the low to mid range, but going to an S&S 585, you're not going to be super impressed with the torque. You're only going to get about 112 foot-pounds of torque. Now for horsepower with that cam swap, you are getting a decent gain, upwards of roughly about 107 horsepower. So not a whole lot of gain over just the Screamin Eagle 255 with a good set of exhaust, a tune, and an air cleaner. But we do pick up pretty good, decent gain in the horsepower department, just not so much on the torque. Now, another good swap is the Redshift Rs 587 cam. This is a pretty decent cam for a Screamin Eagle 110. These are really designed to work with the lower compression that the SC110 has. But as far as horsepower, we're only getting about 101 horsepower, but we get a pretty decent torque gain, up to roughly about 114 foot-pounds of torque. Now, once again, as I mentioned, the wood cams, they just do it better than everybody else out on the market. And you can swap in a wood TW 222 into your Screamin Eagle 110. This is probably one of the better cams out there to go ahead and swap over to. The 222 is a great cam whether you have a big heavy bagger, Dyna. This is really a good all-around cam. It does well in the 103 and it does very well in the 110. Now, in the 110 engine, we're looking at horsepower roughly about 105, which isn't too bad, but when we're talking torque, we're getting 118 foot-pounds of torque. That's pretty hard to argue with in the torque department. Now, if you want a cam that is a little bit more centered around torque and maybe potentially pick up a little bit more horsepower, there is the Wood TW7H. Now, this cam is going to produce roughly about 107 horsepower and 118 foot-pounds of torque. So, not much difference there from what you were getting with the 222, but you are getting that horsepower and torque a little sooner than you would with the 222. But I like the 222 from Wood because you get a much broader range. Now, if you have a 110, you do have the option of going to the Screamin Eagle 117 kit. Now, the 117 kit, yeah, these are great, but for the money versus what you get with just a bolt-in cam, it's kind of arguable if you really want to spend that money to go with that big bore kit, considering the power and torque you get out with the cam. Now, with the Screamin Eagle 117 kit, you're going to be adding the Screamin Eagle 259E cam, which is pretty much Screamin Eagle's baddest twin cam set offering that is out there, which it's still, in my opinion, it really doesn't compare to what the aftermarket offers. But you're also getting the 117-inch big bore, and it's going to increase your compression to 9.9 to 1, which is basically, we could just call it 10 to 1. And you're also getting the Screamin Eagle 58mm throttle body and a set of high-flow injectors. Now, that's a lot of parts. That's a good setup, but what really holds it back is the 259E cam because it is street compliant. And of course, the dyno chart, it's really only showing it to us with the Screamin Eagle mufflers. So you probably gain about 10 horsepower in torque with a good aftermarket exhaust system versus just the Screamin Eagle system. But with the Screamin Eagle system on it, it gets 110 horsepower and 115 foot-pounds of torque. And that's going to run you about $2,200. But, you know, you could just put a bolt-in cam in, like one from Woods, into your 110, and be right there in that range. Maybe a little bit more, even depending on which exhaust system you use. So whether you want to spend all that money, that's really up to you. Now, once again, there is another kit, one of Fuel Moto's kits, that is probably one of the most powerful kits out there, drop-on kit for a 110. It's going to take your 110 to a 113. Now, with Fuel Moto's 113 kit, obviously you get the bored cylinders, so they're going to bore those 110 cylinders out, and they use, of all cams, a wood cam, but it is a Wood TW999, and then also this dyno graph reflects the stock CVO heads with a mild port job on it. Now, with the right cam, a little bit of bore, they do use higher compression at 10.8, so that's pretty high. In my opinion, 10.8 is pretty high for the street, but it is doable. But you're looking at 124 horsepower. Now, 124 horsepower, that's really impressive. That's going to shred some tires. But you really can't argue with that 134 foot-pounds of torque that this kit puts down. And not to mention, they sell this for only $1,400, so that's still quite a bit less than the Screamin Eagle kit. So guys, I'm not going to lie, I like the Screamin Eagle 117 kit. The thing that I would do with it, though, is that I would ditch the 259E cam, and since you've already got a good set of heads with good springs in it, I would go ahead and opt for a Wood TW222 in there, which it'll run with that compression. In fact, that 222 would really like that dang near 10 to 1 compression. So, with the 259E out of there, and you put in the Wood 222, I would not be surprised if you were getting 130 foot-pounds of torque and well over 120 horsepower with that kit. And not to mention, you've already got the larger throttle body and the bigger injectors that'll really help support that bore size and the airflow that you're going to be moving through that engine. Because don't forget, those CVO heads, while they're not exactly ported, they do have much larger valves in them. And they also have a better valve spring pack. So if you want to compare the two, you can obviously take a look at the CVO heads versus the Screamin Eagle ported heads, and it becomes pretty obvious. There's not a whole lot special about them other than those larger valves. But guys, Screamin Eagle 110 engine is probably one of my favorite engines out there. I love them. Like I say, they were really in limited production because the S models were kind of a limited run, and obviously all the CVOs were pretty much a limited run. But if you have a 110, there's a lot of power potential in those. And I know people said they did run hot, which they did, being a 110 bore with a very lean factory tune. But you get a good oil cooler on them, you get them tuned for an exhaust and an air cleaner, put some fuel in them, it really cooled them down. They really are a great all-around motor. Now, once again, all the principles apply to putting a cam in it. You still would want to do a performance cam plate and a high-volume oil pump, which all that'll help contribute to cooling the bike down. And you can even take it a step further, go with a larger oil cooler, even with a fan assist. All those things are going to help take the heat out of the engine, especially if you go up to a 117-inch big bore. But, like I said, I like that Screamin Eagle kit. Just, for me, I would have to go ahead and change the cam, and then you could take that cam and sell it to somebody at a swap meet or the bar on a Saturday night. But anyhow, guys, that's all I've got for you this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. I just want to let you guys with the twin cam 110s know you are not forgotten. I did want to do a little something special for you guys. But anyhow, guys, until next week, bundle up, stay warm on the streets, dodge those cars, and I'll catch you guys back here next week with a brand new video. Thanks for watching.